My doctor's voice dropped to a whisper, asking a question that shattered my world. Has your husband been examining you at home? In that instant, I knew something was terribly wrong, and my life was about to unravel. The fluorescent lights in Dr. Evans' office felt unusually harsh that Tuesday morning. I'd scheduled this as a routine follow-up, just the standard 20-week checkup every expectant mother goes through. My husband, Lucas, handled most of my prenatal care at home. It made sense, he was an obstetrician at Metro General Hospital. Everyone we knew thought it was so convenient. But Dr. Evans' hands trembled slightly as she reviewed my file. Her usual warm demeanor had vanished, replaced by something I couldn't quite identify, fear, perhaps, or anger. "Sarah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need you to be completely honest with me." The question about Lucas examining me at home struck me as odd. "Well, yes," I replied, "he's been monitoring everything." "Why would that be a problem?" She closed the folder, leaning forward, her eyes searching mine with an intensity that made my stomach clench. "Because the scarring I'm seeing isn't consistent with pregnancy. These are surgical marks, recent ones." My world tilted sideways. "I don't understand what you're saying." Dr. Evans stood and walked to her desk, pulling out a tablet. "I'm going to show you something, but I need your permission first. This might be difficult to process." I nodded, even though every instinct screamed at me to run from that room. The images on the screen meant nothing to my untrained eyes at first. Medical terminology just never made sense. But Dr. Evans' explanation cut through my confusion like a blade. "Someone has been systematically damaging your cervix. These incisions are deliberate. They're designed to cause a miscarriage, but in a way that would appear natural. Whoever did this has medical knowledge." The room spun. Lucas's face flashed through my mind. His gentle reassurances during my examinations. The way he dismissed my concerns about cramping as normal pregnancy symptoms. His insistence that I didn't need to see another doctor. My husband would never. The words died in my throat. "I've seen this twice before in my career," Dr. Evans continued, her voice steady but grave. "Both times it was a medical professional who wanted to end a pregnancy without the mother's knowledge or consent. The evidence here is clear. If we don't act immediately, you could lose this baby, or worse." She made several calls while I sat frozen in the examination chair. Within 30 minutes, 2 police officers arrived, followed by a hospital administrator and someone from the medical board. They asked questions I couldn't fully process. Everything felt distant, like watching my life through frosted glass. Detective Hayes took my statement with practiced patience. "Sarah, I know this is overwhelming, but Dr. Evans' findings constitute evidence of assault and attempted feticide. We need to move quickly." They explained the next steps. A forensic examination would document everything. They'd need access to Lucas's medical equipment at home. Someone would need to inform the hospital where he worked. "He's there right now," I heard myself say. Tuesday mornings. "He's always in surgery." Detective Hayes exchanged glances with her partner. "We'll coordinate with hospital security. But first, we need to ensure your safety and the baby's." Dr. Evans admitted me to the women's unit under a false name. The staff treated me with careful kindness, the kind reserved for trauma victims, because that's what I was, though my mind refused to accept it. My phone buzzed incessantly. Lucas's messages grew increasingly frantic. "Where are you? Your appointment should have ended hours ago. Sarah, please call me. I'm worried. The police just showed up at the hospital asking about you. What's going on?" I turned the phone off. Dr. Evans had warned me not to communicate with him. Anything I said could compromise the investigation. The forensic examination took 3 hours. A team of specialists photographed and documented every mark, every suspicious element of my condition. They spoke in clinical terms, their professional detachment a strange comfort. This was evidence now, not just my life. A nurse named Jessica sat with me afterward, offering water and quiet companionship. "You're incredibly brave," she said softly. But I didn't feel brave. I felt shattered. Detective Hayes returned that evening with updates. "We executed a search warrant at your home. Dr. Caldwell's medical bag contained instruments that matched the scarring patterns. We also found sedatives, low grade, the kind that would make you drowsy, but not unconscious." "He's been arrested." The words washed over me like cold water. "Why would he do this?" "We're still investigating his motive." "But Sarah, you should know. We found correspondence with another woman, someone he was planning to leave you for once the pregnancy was resolved. Her name was Rachel Miller, a pharmaceutical sales representative he'd met at a medical conference 18 months ago. The emails painted a picture I'd been too trusting to see. Lucas hadn't wanted this baby. He'd wanted his freedom and the life he'd been building in secret. The baby kicked then, a flutter against my ribs that made tears stream down my face. This child, he tried to erase, was still fighting. "Your baby is strong," Dr. Evans assured me during her evening rounds. "We've stabilized everything. With proper care and monitoring, you should carry to term without complications." Should? That word carried mountains of uncertainty. Lucas's parents called my hospital room the next morning. His mother's voice cracked with anguish. "Sarah, there must be some mistake. Lucas would never harm you. He loves you." "The evidence suggests otherwise," I replied, my voice hollow. "He's our son. We know him." I thought I knew him, too. They wanted to believe in his innocence so desperately that they twisted every fact into something more palatable. Their son, the healer, had become something monstrous. The cognitive dissonance was too great. My own mother arrived from Illinois within 24 hours of my call. She held me while I cried, her presence the only stable thing in my collapsing world. "We'll get through this," she whispered. "You and that baby will survive this." The district attorney's office assigned a prosecutor named Janet Morrison. She visited me in the hospital with a briefcase full of documents and a no-nonsense attitude that I found strangely reassuring. "Dr. Caldwell is facing multiple charges: assault, attempted feticide, practicing medicine with intent to harm. The medical board has suspended his license pending investigation. His attorney is already reaching out about a plea deal." "What kind of deal?" I asked. "Reduced charges in exchange for his testimony about intent and methodology." "But Sarah, you don't have to agree to anything. This is your decision." I thought about the baby still growing inside me despite Lucas's efforts. I want him to face everything he did. Every single charge. Janet smiled grimly. "Then that's what we'll pursue." The hospital kept me for a week, monitoring both the baby's condition and my psychological state. A therapist visited daily, helping me process trauma I couldn't yet name. The sessions blurred together, but one thing became crystal clear: I was a survivor, and so was my child. Lucas's colleagues at Metro General Hospital reached out with cautious messages. Some expressed disbelief. Others apologized for missing signs. Dr. Harrison, the department head, sent a formal letter stating that the hospital was conducting its own internal review of all Lucas's cases. "We take these allegations with the utmost seriousness," the letter read. "Patient safety is our paramount concern." Corporate language for "we might be liable." But I appreciated the gesture nonetheless. The hospital's investigation uncovered disturbing patterns. 3 other women had experienced unexplained complications during pregnancies while under Lucas's care. 2 had miscarried. 1 had delivered prematurely with lasting health consequences for her child. None had suspected medical interference. Why would they? Lucas was charming, credentialed, trusted. Detective Hayes interviewed each woman personally. Maria Sanchez broke down during her statement, describing pain she attributed to normal pregnancy difficulties. He told me some women just weren't meant to carry to term, she sobbed. I blamed myself for years. Another woman, Chloe Davis, had divorced her husband after her miscarriage, convinced the stress of their marriage had caused the loss. Learning the truth shattered and relieved her simultaneously. My ex-husband and I could have made it, she told investigators, but I pushed him away because I thought my body had failed us both. The district attorney added additional charges based on these discoveries. Lucas's bail hearing became moot, even if Judge Thompson had been inclined toward leniency. The expanding scope of his crimes eliminated any possibility of pre-trial release. Janet Morrison updated me on each development, her voice growing grim with every call. Sarah, I need you to understand something. What he did to you was calculated and cruel. But you're also the one who survived because you sought outside medical care. The others trusted him completely. The guilt of that statement haunted me for weeks. Why had I scheduled that appointment with Dr. Evans? Some instinct I couldn't name, a whisper of maternal intuition that something felt wrong. Those other women hadn't had that warning system. Or perhaps Lucas had been more careful with them, less arrogant in his methods. Dr. Evans confided during one of my follow-up visits that she'd nearly missed the signs herself. If I'd been having an off day, if I'd been rushed or distracted, I might have attributed the scarring to other causes. The fact that I caught it feels less like skill and more like providence. Don't diminish what you did, I told her firmly. You trusted your instincts when it mattered most. She smiled sadly. I suppose we both did. My mother became my anchor during those tumultuous weeks. She accompanied me to every appointment, every legal meeting, every moment when facing the world alone felt impossible. My father handled practical matters, changing locks on the house Lucas and I had shared, forwarding mail, dealing with well-meaning neighbors who hadn't yet heard the news. People keep asking when Lucas will be home, he reported after one such encounter. They seem genuinely shocked when I tell them the truth. The neighborhood gossip mill churned relentlessly. Some defended Lucas with vigor, unable to reconcile the friendly doctor who treated their ailments with the monster described in news reports. Others claimed they'd always sensed something off about him, rewriting history to cast themselves as prescient. I avoided social media entirely. My mother monitored my accounts, deleting cruel comments and blocking trolls who blamed me for not recognizing my husband's true nature sooner. Victim blaming took creative forms. I should have known, should have suspected, should have protected myself better. These people have never experienced real betrayal, my mother said after one particularly vicious comment thread. They think evil announces itself clearly. They don't understand how it wears a familiar face. Rachel Miller's involvement became tabloid fodder. Photographs of her emerged, attractive, polished, smiling at medical conferences where she'd met Lucas. Reporters tracked her to her apartment in the city, demanding comments she refused to give. Her employer quietly terminated her position, unable to weather the scandal's association. Part of me pitied her. She'd been manipulated, too. Fed lies about Lucas's marriage and availability. But a larger part remembered that she had knowingly pursued a married man, regardless of whatever justifications she'd constructed. Complicity came in degrees, and hers wasn't insignificant. The prosecution offered her immunity in exchange for testimony. She accepted immediately, her attorney negotiating terms that protected her from accessory charges. Her deposition painted Lucas as obsessively focused on ending my pregnancy, discussing methods and timelines with disturbing casualness. He said Sarah would never know, Rachel's statement read. He said it would look completely natural, that he'd be there to comfort her through the loss, and then we could be together openly. Reading those words felt like swallowing glass. Lucas had planned not just my baby's death, but the performance of grief he'd deliver afterward. He calculated how to console me while privately celebrating the success of his crime. Janet Morrison used Rachel's testimony to devastating effect during pre-trial hearings. This wasn't passion or impulse, she argued. This was premeditated harm, discussed and refined over weeks. Dr. Caldwell treated his wife's body as an obstacle to be eliminated. Lucas's defense team scrambled to counter the mounting evidence. They brought in psychological experts who testified about the stress of impending fatherhood, the pressure of maintaining a dual life, the breakdown of rational thinking under emotional duress. But their arguments withered against the concrete facts: surgical instruments, documented injuries, written correspondence outlining intent. The other victims chose not to testify publicly. Their cases settled through civil suits that Metro General Hospital paid quietly, but their medical records became part of the criminal case, establishing a pattern and practice that destroyed any lingering benefit of doubt. I met Maria Sanchez once at the courthouse during a preliminary motion. We recognized each other from news coverage, our eyes meeting across the hallway with shared understanding. She approached slowly, her hands trembling. "I'm sorry this happened to you," she said softly. "I'm sorry he hurt you, too." We stood together in silence for several minutes, two women bound by trauma we'd never sought and wouldn't wish on anyone. She squeezed my hand before leaving, a gesture of solidarity that meant more than any words could convey. The financial unraveling of my marriage proved complex. Lucas and I had joint accounts, shared assets, a mortgage on the home I could no longer bear to enter. My attorney, David Foster, navigated the dissolution with efficient pragmatism. "Everything he earned during the marriage is marital property," David explained. "But given the criminal circumstances, we can argue for an unequal distribution in your favor." Lucas's attorney contested this initially, but the optics of fighting a pregnant woman he tried to harm proved untenable. They agreed to a settlement that gave me the house, the majority of savings, and Lucas's pension if he served his full sentence. I sold the house immediately. Every room contained memories that had curdled into nightmares. The bedroom where Lucas had performed his examinations. The kitchen where we discussed baby names he never intended to use. The nursery I'd begun decorating, ignorant of his plans to ensure it remained empty. A young family bought the property. Their excitement about starting life together a painful reminder of my own naivety. I didn't tell them what had happened there. Let them make happy memories in spaces I'd learned to fear. Moving in with my parents felt like regression at first, returning to my childhood home at 32. But their support proved invaluable. My mother accompanied me to every ultrasound, her hand gripping mine as we watched the baby move on screen, both of us silently willing her survival. "She's a fighter," Dr. Lee said during one appointment, watching the baby's strong heartbeat pulse across the monitor. "Everything looks perfect. Whatever damage was done, we've managed to stabilize and reverse it." The relief of those words made me weep. My baby would survive. She would be born healthy despite Lucas's interference. His attempt to erase her had failed spectacularly. My employer granted extended leave, but I worked remotely when possible, needing the normalcy of spreadsheets and financial projections. Numbers didn't betray you, formulas worked the same way regardless of emotional context. The predictability soothed something raw inside me. Colleagues sent cautious emails, unsure how to address the situation. Some ignored it entirely, discussing work as though nothing had changed. Others offered condolences more appropriate for a death than a divorce. A few shared their own stories of betrayal and survival, the kind of confidences that only emerge during crisis. Ashley, my closest work friend, visited often. She brought food, trashy magazines, and blessedly normal conversation about office politics and celebrity gossip. "You need reminders that the world keeps turning," she said. Lucas didn't get to be my whole story, but he dominated my present whether I wanted him to or not. Every legal filing, every news article, every well-meaning question from acquaintances kept his crimes at the forefront of my existence. Escaping him felt impossible when the justice system required my constant participation in his prosecution. The media attention intensified as the trial date approached. Reporters camped outside my parents' house, shouting questions whenever anyone emerged. My father installed security cameras and threatened trespassing charges, his protective instincts sharpening into something fierce. "These vultures have no decency," he muttered, chasing a particularly aggressive photographer from the lawn. My mother fielded phone calls from producers requesting interviews, book agents offering representation, advocacy groups wanting me to become a spokesperson for medical mistreatment victims. I declined everything. This was my trauma to process privately, not a platform for public consumption. But Janet Morrison encouraged one interview, a carefully controlled segment with a respected journalist known for sensitive crime reporting. It shapes the narrative before the defense can, she explained. And it humanizes you for potential jurors. I agreed reluctantly, sitting across from Megan Stone in my parents' living room while cameras recorded every word. Megan asked gentle questions about my marriage, the pregnancy, the discovery. I answered truthfully but carefully, aware that Lucas's attorneys would scrutinize every syllable. What do you want people to understand about your experience? Megan asked near the interview's end. That betrayal can come from the person you trust most, I replied. That evil doesn't always announce itself. That survival isn't pretty or simple, but it's possible. The segment aired 2 weeks before trial. Public opinion, previously divided between sympathy and skepticism, shifted decisively in my favor. The comment sections filled with support, shared stories, and outrage at Lucas's actions. For once, the attention felt useful rather than invasive. Rachel Miller never contacted me directly, but the prosecution shared her statement. She'd known Lucas was married, but claimed ignorance about the pregnancy or his plans. He told me his wife couldn't have children, her testimony read. He said they were getting divorced. Lies stacked upon lies, each one carefully constructed. The preliminary hearing happened 3 weeks after my initial discovery. I attended via video conference, still under medical observation. Lucas sat beside his attorney, looking diminished, his confidence stripped away. He glanced at the camera once, his eyes pleading, but I felt nothing except cold certainty. Mr. Caldwell, the evidence presented today is substantial and deeply disturbing, Judge Thompson stated. Bail is denied. You'll remain in custody pending trial. Lucas's mother sobbed audibly in the courtroom. Part of me pitied her, mourning the son she thought she knew. But a larger part of me remained focused on survival. Mine and my baby's. I moved in with my mother after being discharged from the hospital. My father converted their guest room into a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow and assembling furniture with determined focus. Neither of them asked questions I couldn't answer. They simply provided sanctuary. Dr. Evans referred me to a high-risk pregnancy specialist named Dr. Lee. He monitored my condition weekly, adjusting medications and ensuring that Lucas's damage wouldn't cause permanent complications. You're healing remarkably well, he said during one appointment. The body's resilience never ceases to amaze me. But emotional healing proved more complicated. Nightmares plagued my sleep. Visions of Lucas's hands, once gentle, transformed into weapons. Therapy helped, but recovery wasn't linear. Some days I functioned normally. Others, I couldn't leave my parents' house. The trial began in early autumn, when the morning air carried the first hints of winter. The prosecution built their case methodically, calling expert witnesses who explained the medical evidence in terms even laypeople could understand. Lucas's defense argued temporary insanity, claiming the stress of impending fatherhood had broken something in his mind. Janet Morrison destroyed that narrative during cross-examination. Dr. Caldwell, you maintained a relationship with Miss Miller for 18 months while married to your wife, correct? Yes, Lucas admitted. You purchased a condominium in her name 3 months before your wife became pregnant? Yes. You researched methods of inducing miscarriage. Using medical databases at Metro General Hospital? I was conducting professional research. Answer the question, Dr. Caldwell. Yes. Each admission built an undeniable picture of premeditation. This wasn't a mental breakdown. It was calculated cruelty. I testified on the 5th day. Walking into that courtroom required every ounce of courage I possessed. Lucas's eyes followed me to the witness stand, but I focused on Janet instead. She guided me through the timeline gently. My pregnancy announcement. Lucas's subdued reaction. The home examinations that grew increasingly painful. My concerns dismissed as anxiety. Did you ever consent to any procedure that might end your pregnancy? Janet asked. Never. I wanted this baby more than anything. The jury's faces told me they believed me. Lucas's attorney tried to paint me as vindictive during cross-examination. Isn't it true you suspected your husband of infidelity before this alleged incident? No, I replied firmly. I trusted him completely. You never questioned his late nights at the hospital? He is a doctor. Late nights are part of the job. The attorney's strategy collapsed under the weight of medical evidence. No amount of character assassination could explain away surgical scarring. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman's expression revealed nothing. On the count of assault with intent to cause bodily harm, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of attempted feticide, guilty. On the count of practicing medicine with intent to harm, guilty. Lucas's face crumpled. His mother wailed, but I felt only profound exhaustion. The additional charges related to the other victims brought 3 more guilty verdicts. Each one represented a woman whose suffering Lucas had orchestrated with clinical precision. Each one validated pain these women had carried for years, believing themselves somehow at fault. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Janet Morrison delivered a prepared statement while I stood slightly behind her, my hand resting protectively over my swollen belly. Cameras flashed relentlessly, capturing what would become iconic images: the pregnant woman seeking justice, the lawyer who'd secured it, the moment accountability finally arrived. Maria Sanchez attended the verdict reading, sitting in the back row with her husband. They left quickly afterward, but not before she caught my eye and nodded once. A small acknowledgement that we both received something we'd needed, even if it couldn't undo what had been done. Chloe Davis released a statement through her attorney. Today's verdict provides closure I never thought possible. For years, I blamed myself for a loss that was actually a crime. Knowing the truth doesn't erase the pain, but it redistributes the guilt to where it belongs. The hospital settlement with the victims remained confidential, but whispers suggested substantial amounts. Money couldn't repair broken trust or restore lost pregnancies, but it could fund therapy, cover medical bills from complications, and provide some measure of material comfort while emotional wounds healed. Metro General Hospital appointed a new department head and implemented oversight protocols designed to prevent similar mistreatment. Every physician's care would be subject to random audits. Patients would be encouraged to seek second opinions. The systems that had allowed Lucas's crimes would be dismantled and rebuilt. It's too late for us, Maria Sanchez said in a victims' advocacy newsletter. But maybe it protects future patients. Maybe that's worth something. Lucas's medical career lay in ruins beyond any possibility of reconstruction. The state medical board didn't just revoke his license. They ensured his case would be cited in ethics training for decades to come, a cautionary tale about the catastrophic consequences of violating patient trust. His colleagues at Metro General distanced themselves with varying degrees of grace. Some sent private apologies for not recognizing warning signs. Others simply erased him from their professional narratives, removing his name from research papers and deleting collaborative photographs from department websites. Dr. Harrison gave one interview about the scandal, his voice heavy with regret. We trusted Lucas because he presented well, competent, caring, dedicated. The lesson here is that credentials and charm can mask profound dysfunction. We failed these women by not looking deeper. The institutional reckoning spread beyond Metro General. Medical schools reviewed their ethics curricula. Professional organizations revised their codes of conduct. Lucas's crimes became a rallying point for broader conversations about power dynamics in healthcare and the vulnerability of pregnant patients. I received letters from medical students thanking me for coming forward, explaining how my case had shaped their understanding of professional responsibility. Reading them provided unexpected comfort, proof that horror could be transformed into education, that my suffering might prevent others' future pain. Judge Thompson scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later, giving both sides time to prepare their final arguments. Janet Morrison worked with me on a victim impact statement, helping me articulate the ongoing consequences of Lucas's actions without becoming mired in rage or grief. The goal is to make them understand that this isn't over for you, she explained. That his crimes extend beyond the courtroom and into every day of your foreseeable future. I wrote and rewrote the statement, struggling to capture the complexity of my experience. How do you explain to strangers the feeling of your body becoming a crime scene? The way trust died not in one moment but in thousands of small realizations, each one recontextualizing memories you thought were loving. My mother helped me practice delivering the statement, timing it to ensure I could speak without breaking down completely. You can show emotion, she advised, but you want them to hear the words, not just see tears. The night before sentencing, I barely slept. The baby kicked vigorously, as though sensing my agitation. I placed my hands on my belly, feeling her move beneath my palms. We're almost through this part, I whispered. Then we can start living instead of just surviving. The courtroom filled early on sentencing day. Victims' families occupied several rows. Their presence a reminder that Lucas's crimes had rippled outward, touching dozens of lives. His parents sat on the opposite side, isolated by their continued insistence on their son's fundamental goodness, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. The prosecution went first, with Janet Morrison methodically outlining the severity of Lucas's crimes. She discussed the violation of medical ethics, the exploitation of intimate trust, the deliberate harm inflicted on vulnerable patients who'd relied on his expertise. Your Honor, Dr. Caldwell didn't make a single terrible choice, she argued. He made hundreds of calculated decisions, each one prioritizing his desires over his patients' health and safety. He researched methods. He acquired tools. He created opportunities for harm. This was systematic predation disguised as medical care. Lucas's attorney countered with appeals to rehabilitation potential. He described Lucas's remorse, his participation in prison therapy programs, his stated commitment to understanding how he'd fallen so far. Character witnesses testified to Lucas's previous good works, attempting to paint his crimes as an aberration rather than a revelation of true character. But the defense's arguments felt hollow against the weight of evidence. Lucas himself stood to address the court, his voice shaking as he apologized to me, to the other victims, to the medical profession he dishonored. I don't expect forgiveness, he said, his eyes fixed on the floor. I don't deserve it. I can only say that I recognize the magnitude of what I've done and commit to spending the rest of my life trying to understand how I became capable of such cruelty. His words meant nothing. Apologies couldn't unharm, couldn't restore innocence, couldn't rewind time to before my world shattered in Dr. Evans' examination room. When my turn came to speak, I approached the podium with deliberate calm. The statement I'd prepared felt both inadequate and excessive. Words couldn't truly convey the depth of betrayal, but I had to try. Your Honor, Lucas Caldwell didn't just commit assault, I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. He weaponized intimacy. He transformed medical knowledge, meant to heal, into tools for harm. He looked me in the eye while actively trying to end our child's life, all while wearing the mask of a concerned husband and caring physician. I detailed the ongoing impacts, the hypervigilance during medical appointments, the difficulty trusting anyone in positions of authority, the nightmares that still disrupted my sleep. I spoke about the other victims, women who'd blamed themselves for losses Lucas had engineered. His crimes didn't end when I discovered them, I continued. They continue every day in the trauma they created. Every ultrasound where I fear bad news, every contraction that will eventually bring my daughter into this world, wondering if my body can successfully do what he tried to prevent. Every time I have to explain to my child someday why her father isn't part of our lives. I looked directly at Lucas then, forcing him to meet my eyes. You stole peace from me and from our daughter before she was even born. You stole it from the other women you harmed. No sentence can give that back, but justice demands you face consequences proportionate to the devastation you've caused. The courtroom remained silent as I returned to my seat. Janet squeezed my hand briefly, a gesture of support and approval. Judge Thompson scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. The prosecution recommended the maximum 15 years with possibility of parole after 10. Lucas's attorney pleaded for leniency, citing his previously unblemished record and contributions to medicine. "Mr. Caldwell," Judge Thompson said, her voice hard as stone, "you violated every oath you took as a physician. You betrayed your wife's trust in the most intimate, horrifying way imaginable. You attempted to end your unborn child's life. I find no grounds for mercy. 15 years, no possibility of parole for 12. Lucas was led away in handcuffs. He looked back once, mouthing, "I'm sorry." Too late. Far too late. The medical board revoked his license permanently. Metro General Hospital settled with me out of court, though money felt meaningless compared to what I'd lost. Not my marriage, that had been a lie. But my sense of safety, my ability to trust instinctively, my naive belief that love could never twist into something so dark. My daughter, Ella, was born in February during a snowstorm that blanketed the city in white. Dr. Lee delivered her personally, his steady hands ensuring a healthy arrival despite everything. She emerged crying and perfect, her tiny fists waving at this new world. I named her Ella. Not subtle, perhaps, but true. My parents cried when I told them. "It's perfect," my mother whispered, holding her granddaughter with reverent care. Lucas sent a letter from prison weeks after Ella's birth. It arrived forwarded through my attorney, the envelope covered in legal stamps. I almost burned it unopened, but curiosity won. His handwriting was shaky, his words full of regrets and excuses. He blamed stress, fear, weakness. He begged for forgiveness, for a chance to know his daughter, for understanding. I read it once and filed it away with the other trial documents. Maybe someday Ella would want to know her father's words. Maybe she'd need to understand how someone could fall so far. But that would be her choice when she was ready. For now, we were building a life free from his shadow. My parents doted on Ella with grandparental enthusiasm. I returned to work part-time, finding purpose in my career as a financial analyst. Dr. Evans checked in regularly, celebrating each milestone of Ella's development. Rachel Miller sent an apology letter that I did burn. Some bridges weren't worth preserving, even with fire. Therapy continued, helping me process layers of trauma I hadn't known existed. My therapist, Dr. Collins, helped me understand that healing wasn't about forgetting or forgiving. It was about reclaiming agency over my own narrative. "You survived something that would have broken many people," she told me during one session. "Not just survived, you protected your child and ensured justice. That's extraordinary." I didn't feel extraordinary. Most days I felt ordinary. A single mother managing work and childcare, finding joy in small moments, slowly rebuilding trust in the world. Ella's first birthday arrived with surprising speed. We celebrated at my parents' house with cake and balloons, surrounded by people who genuinely loved us. She smashed her face into frosting with gleeful abandon, laughing when my father made silly faces. No one mentioned Lucas. His absence was simply absence, no longer a wound. Detective Hayes visited that spring with news. Lucas had been attacked by another inmate, someone whose sister had died from pregnancy complications. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. He survived, but the incident ensured his protective custody status for the remainder of his sentence. "I thought you'd want to know," she said, "though I understand if you don't care." "I hope he survives," I replied honestly. Not for his sake, but because death would be too easy. He needs to live with what he did. She nodded approvingly. That's a healthier perspective than most victims achieve. Victim. The word still felt uncomfortable, but I'd stopped fighting it. Accepting what happened didn't mean letting it define me. Ella started walking at 13 months. Her wobbly steps celebrated like Olympic achievements. She was bright and curious, entirely unburdened by the circumstances of her conception. That innocence was precious, something I'd protect fiercely for as long as possible. Eventually, she'd learn the truth. But it would be the right truth at the right time, delivered with love and context. She'd know that she was wanted desperately by her mother, that her existence was a triumph, that darkness had tried and failed to extinguish her light. Lucas's parents attempted contact when Ella turned 2. A letter arrived requesting visitation rights as grandparents. My attorney handled the response swiftly. Under state law, they have limited standing given their son's criminal conviction and your primary custody, she explained. They can petition the court, but success is unlikely. I considered allowing supervised visits. Ella deserved family connections if possible. But their continued insistence on Lucas's innocence, their inability to acknowledge the harm he caused, made that impossible. Not now, I told my attorney. Maybe someday, if they can accept reality, but I won't expose Ella to people who deny what her father did. The petition was denied. They didn't appeal. Life settled into comfortable rhythms. Ella attended preschool, making friends and learning with enthusiastic energy. I dated cautiously, though trust came slowly. The men who couldn't handle my history weren't worth my time. The ones who stayed proved themselves through patience and genuine care. Dr. Evans retired when Ella was 4, but not before one final appointment. You know, Sarah, that day in my office changed my approach to medicine. I'm more watchful now, more willing to trust my instincts when something feels wrong. You helped me become a better doctor. The compliment felt undeserved, but I accepted it gracefully. You saved our lives. That's not something I'll ever forget. She hugged me then, breaking professional boundaries one last time. You saved yourselves. I just opened the door. Ella asked about her father when she turned 5. The question arrived casually, prompted by a classmate's family tree project. Where's my daddy? She asked, her innocent eyes searching mine. I'd prepared for this moment with Dr. Collins' guidance. Your daddy made some very bad choices before you were born. He's in a place where people go when they break important rules. But you have so many people who love you. Me, Grandma, Grandpa, and lots of others. Will I ever meet him? Maybe when you're older, if you want to. But right now, he can't be part of our lives. She processed this with the adaptability of childhood. Okay. Can I have a snack? Crisis averted, at least for now. There would be harder conversations ahead, but we'd face them together. Lucas became eligible for parole when Ella was 12. The hearing notice arrived with clinical formality, informing me of my right to provide victim impact testimony. I drafted my statement carefully, balancing honesty with restraint. Ella was old enough now to understand more, though I shielded her from the details. The parole board listened to my testimony via video conference. I explained the ongoing impact of Lucas's actions, the hypervigilance, the difficulty trusting medical professionals, the conversations with Ella about her father's absence. He stole years of peace from both of us, I concluded. Not just through his actions, but through their lasting effects. 12 years isn't enough. Lucas's attorney presented evidence of his rehabilitation, therapy completion, educational programs, exemplary behavior. Lucas himself apologized again, his words polished by practice. The board deliberated for 30 minutes. Parole denied. Mr. Caldwell will be eligible for reconsideration in 3 years. Relief flooded through me. 3 more years of guaranteed safety, of Ella's childhood protected from his premature re-entry into our world. But I also knew that eventually he'd be released. The criminal justice system guaranteed that reality. When that day came, I'd be ready, not with fear, but with the boundaries and strength I'd spent years building. Ella flourished into adolescence with remarkable resilience. She knew her story now, the age-appropriate version I'd carefully crafted. She knew about her father's crimes, about the trial, about why we'd never lived as a traditional family. "I'm glad you protected me," she said one evening, her teenage frankness catching me off guard. "Some of my friends' parents stayed together even when they shouldn't have. That seems harder." Wisdom beyond her years, but then she'd always been extraordinary. Lucas was released 3 years later, when Ella was 15. The notice came with conditions: no contact with me or Ella without written consent, mandatory therapy, restricted medical license if any was possible to obtain. He didn't attempt contact. Perhaps prison had taught him something about respecting boundaries. Or perhaps his attorney had explained the legal consequences of violation. Either way, his absence was his greatest gift. Ella decided at 16 that she wanted to study medicine. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "I want to help people the right way," she explained. "I want to prove that our story doesn't end with his mistakes." Dr. Lee wrote her a recommendation letter for college applications. So did Dr. Evans, emerging from retirement one final time. Ella earned admission to 3 excellent programs, ultimately choosing one across the country, her own Declaration of Independence. Standing in her dorm room that first day, helping her unpack, I felt the final pieces of our story settling into place. We'd survived. More than survived, we'd built something beautiful from the wreckage Lucas had tried to create. "Mom," Ella said as I prepared to leave. "Thank you for fighting for me. Even when I didn't exist yet, you fought." I hugged her tightly. This remarkable young woman who had grown from such darkness into such light. "You were always worth fighting for." Lucas requested contact with Ella when she turned 18. The letter arrived through proper legal channels, asking for one meeting, one chance to apologize directly. Ella called me immediately. "What do you think I should do?" "That's entirely your decision," I replied. "I'll support whatever you choose." She met him 3 months later in a supervised facility with a therapist present. I waited in the parking lot, my phone clutched tightly in case she needed immediate rescue. She emerged 2 hours later, her face unreadable. We drove in silence for 10 minutes before she spoke. "He's pathetic. Not scary, not powerful, just pathetic. A broken man trying to justify the unjustifiable." "How do you feel?" "Glad I went. Glad I heard him out. Gladder that I never have to see him again." She never did. That meeting provided closure she hadn't known she needed. The final period on a sentence that had begun before her birth. Now, watching Ella graduate medical school with honors, I reflect on the journey that brought us here. That morning in Dr. Evans' office, when my world collapsed and rebuilt itself simultaneously, feels both distant and immediate. Lucas took so much from us, but he failed to take our future. He failed to destroy the love I had for my unborn child. He failed to break us. Ella takes her oath as a physician with a steady voice and clear eyes, promising to do no harm. The phrase carries extra weight for both of us. A reclamation of words her father violated so completely. Afterward, she hugs me tightly. "We did it, Mom. Despite everything, we did it." Yes, I think, watching her celebrate with classmates who'd become family. We survived the unsurvivable, healed the unhealable, and transformed trauma into triumph. That's not revenge. That's resurrection. What do you think? Can something truly beautiful rise from such brokenness?